In the heart of Mbali, a village where the rivers sang and the trees whispered ancient secrets, lived a woman so beautiful that time seemed to halt in her presence. Her name was Zuwena. Her skin glowed like moonlight on still water. Her eyes sparkled like stars trapped in an earthly body, and her smile, oh, her smile, could turn even the most hardened warrior into a poet. Whenever Zuena walked through the marketplace, traders forgot their prices, men abandoned their chores, and even the birds in the trees seemed to pause as if to admire her. But beauty, as the elders often warned, was both a blessing and a curse. And in Zuena's case, it was far more curse than blessing. She had a secret, one so dark, so terrifying, that no man could ever know. Because if he did, if any man dared to uncover the truth hidden beneath her garments, he would never be the same again. She had seen it before. She knew what would happen. And so she kept them at a distance. No touching before marriage, she always said with a teasing smile. Men saw it as a sign of virtue. They praised her for her dignity, admired her for her strength. But Zuena knew better. This was not about dignity. This was about survival. For she had learned the hard way. Her secret was not just hers to carry, it was a test. And every man who tried to claim her as his own would have to face the wrath of a curse older than time itself. Until one day, a man named Khamari entered her life, and the curse began its cycle once more. Khamari was unlike any other man in Mbali. Strong and fearless, he had traveled across the lands, trading, hunting, and seeking adventure. He was tall, with skin kissed by the sun and eyes that held the wisdom of his journeys. The moment he saw Zuena, he was lost. His heart pounded like a war drum, and his feet refused to move. "Who is she?" he asked an elder at the marketplace. The old man chuckled. "That, my son, is Zuena. She is as untouchable as the wind. Many have tried to win her heart, but none have succeeded." Khamari smiled. "Then I shall be the first." The elder sighed. "Be careful, young one. There is more to Zuwena than beauty. She carries a secret, one that has ruined men before you." But Khamari was not afraid. He had wrestled with lions, crossed deserts, and faced warriors in battle. How dangerous could one woman be? He approached Zuena the next day, offering her a golden necklace from distant lands. She accepted it with a graceful nod, but did not let him touch her hand. "No touching before marriage," she reminded him with a smile. Khamari laughed. "A woman of virtue. I respect that." Days turned into weeks, and Khamari did everything to win Zuwena's heart. He brought her gifts, sang to her beneath the moonlight, and spoke words that melted even her carefully guarded heart. For the first time, Zuwena felt something she had never dared to before, hope. But deep inside, she knew how this story would end, and so the curse waited. Khamari was not a man who waited long when he made up his mind. One evening, beneath the vast Mbali sky, he went to Zuwena's father and asked for her hand. The village rejoiced. "Finally," they whispered, "our beautiful Zuwena will have a husband." The elders prepared for the grandest wedding Mbali had ever seen. The finest fabrics were woven, goats and cattle were slaughtered, and drummers practiced songs that would echo through the night. Zuena, however, did not share in the celebration. She knew what would happen. And on the night of the wedding, as Khamari took her to their new home, she could feel the curse stirring. "Do not be afraid, my love," Khamari whispered, pulling her close. Her heart pounded. She had to tell him. She had to warn him. But it was too late. As Khamari undressed her, his eyes widened in horror. He stumbled backward, his hands trembling, his breath stolen from his lungs. Then, just as quickly as the shock had come, he let out a blood-curdling scream, and just like that, Khamari fell to the ground, blind. The moment Khamari's scream rang through the night, the village awoke. Men and women rushed to his home, torches in hand, their faces filled with confusion and fear. They found him on the ground, his eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. Zuwena sat in the corner, tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" the elders demanded. Khamari pointed at her. His lips trembled, but no words came out. The villagers gasped. "She has cursed him!" Zuwena shook her head. "I did not ask for this. I tried to stop it." But the people would not listen. The whispers began. The fear grew. And just like that, the village turned against Zuwena. The air in Mbali was thick with fear. Torches flickered in the dark, casting shadows on the frightened faces of the villagers. Khamari lay on the ground, his chest rising and falling with panicked breaths. But his eyes, those strong, fearless eyes, were empty, blind. Zuwena knelt beside him, shaking, her hands gripping the fabric of her dress. She knew what was coming. "She has cursed him," someone in the crowd shouted. "She is a witch," another voice called out. "No," Zuwena gasped. "I never wanted this. I tried to stop it." But the villagers did not hear her words. They saw only a man who had entered his home strong and left it broken. And they saw only one woman with him. Khamari groaned. He tried to speak, but his voice came out in broken, desperate gasps. An elder, Baba Gedi, stepped forward. His face was lined with wisdom, but his eyes held no mercy. "Zuwena," he said, his voice low and measured, "tell us the truth. What have you done to Khamari?" She opened her mouth to explain, to tell them of the curse. But before she could, Khamari let out another piercing wail. A chill ran through the crowd. "This is not normal," Baba Gedi whispered. "We must call the priest." And just like that, the fate of Zuwena was no longer in her hands. By sunrise, the village square was filled with people. Khamari had been carried to a healer, but no cure had been found. His blindness was not of this world. And so the villagers called upon Mzi Amani, the high priest of Mbali. He was an old man with deep wrinkles and piercing eyes that saw beyond what was normal. Mzi Amani stood before Zuwena, his hands wrapped around his wooden staff. "Child," he said, his voice slow and thoughtful, "you carry something unnatural within you, something dark." Zuwena's heart pounded. "I am not a witch," she whispered. The priest nodded, as if he expected her to say that. Then, without warning, he raised his staff and touched her forehead. A shockwave burst from his touch. The villagers gasped as wind erupted around them, lifting dust and leaves into the air. Zuwena's body trembled. She could feel it. The curse. It had been buried deep inside her for so long that she had almost forgotten its weight. But now, under the priest's power, it stirred. "It is true," Mziamani whispered. "You are cursed." A ripple of horror passed through the villagers. "She must leave," someone shouted. "She will bring death to us all." Zuwena turned to Baba Gedi, then to the faces of those she had known her whole life. None of them defended her, not even her father. Mzee Amani sighed. "For the safety of Mbali, Zuwena must be banished." The world tilted. Zuwena's breath came in short gasps. She had known this moment would come, but still, the pain was unbearable. She was alone, and so, as the sun reached its peak, Zuwena was cast out of Mbali, never to return. Zuwena walked with heavy steps. The trees of the forest loomed around her, their branches twisted like claws. The sunlight barely touched the ground, leaving shadows stretched and endless. She had no food, no water, no direction, only pain. Her father had not even looked at her as she was banished. The villagers, the same ones who had once praised her beauty, had turned their backs on her. She stumbled over a root and fell to her knees, dirt clinging to her skin. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to cry. But in the silence of the wilderness, something stirred. She was not alone. A rustling in the bushes made her freeze. She wiped her tears and listened. A low growl rumbled through the air. Then, out of the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. A beast, a great black panther, emerged from its darkness, its muscles rippling under its sleek fur. It was larger than any panther Zuwena had ever seen. Her heart pounded. She tried to move, but her body refused. The panther took a step closer, and then another. And then it spoke. "Do not be afraid, cursed one," it said, its voice deep and ancient. Zuwena's breath caught in her throat. The beast knew. Zuwena could hardly think. The panther stood before her, its golden eyes burning into hers. "How do you know me?" she whispered. The beast tilted its head. "I have watched you since the day you were born." Zuwena's heart clenched. "Who? What are you?" "I am Baku," the panther said, "guardian of the cursed." Zuwena felt cold. "The cursed?" she echoed. Baku took a slow step forward, circling her. "You are not the first to carry this burden, Zuwena, and you will not be the last." She swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" Baku sighed, his tail flicking. "It means your curse is older than you, older than your village, older than Mbali itself." Zuwena shook her head. "Number, this is just misfortune. Bad luck." Baku let out a low growl. "Is it?" Zuwena felt the weight of his words press on her chest. "You were marked at birth," Baku continued. "A sacrifice in a battle you do not yet understand." Zuwena's lips parted. "Who cursed me?" Baku's eyes darkened. "Not who," he said. Zuwena's stomach twisted. "What?" She had thought she had lost everything, but in that moment, she realized something far worse. She did not even know who she truly was. Zuwena's breath came in short gasps as Baku, the black panther, circled her like a predator studying its prey. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do you mean I was marked at birth?" The great beast stopped and gazed at her, his golden eyes glowing. "Your curse did not begin with you, Zuwena," Baku said, his voice like distant thunder. "It began long before you were born, and it will not end unless you end it." Zuwena swallowed. "How?" Baku let out a deep growl. "First, you must understand what was done to you." He raised a massive paw and with the tip of his claw pointed at her stomach. Zuwena frowned, looking down. Then she saw it. Something she had never noticed before. A mark, faint but unmistakable. A symbol carved into her skin just below her ribs. It was no ordinary birthmark. It was deliberate. A brand. She gasped and stumbled back. "These," she whispered, fingers trembling as she traced the unfamiliar pattern. "What is this?" Baku's voice was heavy with meaning. "The mark of the firstborn sacrifice." Zuwena's blood ran cold. She had been cursed from birth. And someone had done this to her on purpose. Zuwena could barely breathe as Baku's words settled over her. "Sacrifice?" She shook her head, her heart pounding. "Number, this can't be true." Baku sat on his haunches, his massive frame unmovable. "It is true, and I am here to help you understand it." Zuwena clenched her fists. "Then tell me everything." The panther's tail flicked as he began his tale. "Long ago, before Mbali, before the villages and kingdoms you know, there was a city, Zadira, the forgotten kingdom. It was a land of great magic and terrible secrets. Zuwena listened, mesmerized. Baku continued. The people of Zadira worshipped a goddess named Nyoka, the serpent mother. She granted them wisdom and power, but in exchange, she demanded a sacrifice every generation. Zuwena shivered. The firstborn daughter of the royal bloodline was always given to her, Baku said. And you, Zuwena, are the last of that bloodline. Zuwena's word tilted. No, she whispered, shaking her head. My family is from Mbali. My father is just a trader. My mother. She stopped. Her mother had died when she was a child. Had she? Had she known? Baku's voice softened. You were never meant to be ordinary. You were meant to die as an offering to Nyoka. But something went wrong. Zuena's fingers curled over her cursed mark. Someone had stopped the sacrifice. Someone had hidden her away. And now, the goddess wanted her back. Zuena's heart raced. If I was meant to be sacrificed, why am I still alive? Baku's golden eyes darkened because someone defied the gods. Someone stole you from the altar before the sacrifice could be completed. Zuwena felt dizzy. Who? She whispered. Who saved me? Baku's ears twitched. I do not know, but I know this. Nyoka's priests are still searching for you. The air around them grew heavy. A chill crept over Zuwena's skin. Right now, they believe you are dead. That is why they have not found you yet. Baku's voice was urgent. But that will not last forever. Zuwena swallowed hard. She had been running her whole life without knowing it. And now, the ones who haunted her from birth would come for her again. She had two choices, run or fight. Zuwena squared her shoulders. Tell me how to stop this. Baku's eyes gleamed. Then we begin your training. Baku led Zuwena deeper into the wilderness, where the trees stretched high into the sky, their roots weaving through the ground like veins. If you wish to break this curse, you must be ready, he said. Zuwena nodded, determination settling in her chest. What do I need to do? Baku prowled around her. You must learn to fight. You must learn to defend yourself. You must awaken the power inside you. Zuwena frowned. I have no power. Baku's lips curled into something almost like a smile. That is where you are wrong. Then, without warning, he attacked. Zuwena barely had time to move before the great beast lunged. She threw herself to the side, rolling in the dirt, her breath escaping in a gasp. Baku turned, his golden eyes glowing. Good, you have reflexes. Zuwena scrambled to her feet, her heart racing, but she was not afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt alive. The curse had stolen her freedom, but maybe, just maybe, she could take it back. Zuwena crouched low, her heart pounding as Baku prowled around her, his golden eyes locked onto hers. The training had begun, and she was already exhausted. You fight like a child, Baku growled. Zuwena wiped sweat from her brow, narrowing her eyes. Then teach me. Baku lunged again, this time faster. Zuwena barely had time to dodge before she was knocked off her feet, landing hard against the damp earth. Again, Baku commanded. Zuwena gritted her teeth and pushed herself up. She would not be weak. She would not let the curse define her. She steadied herself, her muscles aching, but her resolve firm. As Baku charged, something inside her stirred. For the first time, instead of dodging, she met the attack head on. Her hands moved instinctively, and as she braced for impact, a force pulsed through her body. The air around her shifted. Baku staggered back, his eyes widening. Zuwena gasped. What was that? She whispered. Baku's expression darkened. Your power is waking up. A hidden force had been buried inside her all this time, and now it was ready to unleash itself. That night, Zuwena barely slept. Her body ached from training, but her mind was restless. As she closed her eyes, a vision overtook her. She stood before a temple, its pillars cracked and broken with time. The air was thick with whispers, voices calling her name. A woman stood at the temple's entrance, her back turned. She wore a flowing black robe and her long braids swayed like snakes. Zuwena took a step forward, her breath shaky. "Who are you?" The woman turned. Her eyes were glowing yellow. "You cannot run forever," the woman whispered. "The goddess awaits you." Zuwena jolted awake, gasping. Her hands trembled. That woman. She had never seen her before, but deep inside, she knew her. And she knew what the vision meant. The goddess Nyoka was calling her, and time was running out. Baku sensed it first. The morning was quiet, too quiet. Zuena noticed his ears twitching, his body stiffening. "What is it?" she asked, gripping her dagger. Baku's voice was low and urgent. "They have found you." The priest of Nyoka had finally learned that Zuena was still alive, and now they had come to take her back. Through the trees, figures in dark robes moved with unnatural silence. Their faces were covered, their hands carrying weapons dipped in poison. Baku growled. "They are the hunters of Nyoka, assassins. They will not stop until they drag you to the altar." Suena's breath hitched. She was not ready. Not yet, but she had no choice. The fight for her life had begun. The first assassin lunged from the shadows, his blade flashing in the dim light. Zuwena barely dodged, rolling to the side as the dagger sliced the air where her head had been. Baku roared and leaped, knocking one of the priests into a tree. Zuena's instincts kicked in. She spun, grabbing a fallen branch and swinging it hard at her attacker. It snapped against his ribs, sending him staggering. More of them emerged, their movements unnatural, their eyes glowing faintly, filled with Nyoka's power. Zuena's hands burned with the same energy she had felt the day before. It was rising. She didn't know how to use it, but she had to try. She raised her hands, and suddenly the wind around her shifted. Leaves lifted into the air. The trees shook. A pulse of power erupted from her body, sending the priest flying backward. Silence. Even Baku looked at her in surprise. Zuwena panted, her hands trembling. She had just used magic, and she didn't even know how she had done it. The assassins were gone, their bodies motionless on the forest floor. But Zuwena was shaken. She looked at her hands, still tingling with energy. What was that? Baku studied her, his tail flicking. "Your bloodline. You are stronger than I thought." Zuwena clenched her fists. "If I have this power, why don't I know how to use it?" Baku sighed. "Because it was sealed, hidden from you, so that you would never find out what you are." Zuwena frowned. "And what am I?" Baku's golden eyes burned into hers. "You are the last heir of Zadira." Zuwena's breath caught in her throat. She was not just a girl cursed from birth. She was the last survivor of a forgotten kingdom. And the goddess wanted her back. The fight had changed everything. Zuwena now knew the truth. Her power was real, and her past was far more important than she had ever imagined. If she wanted to survive, she had only one choice. She had to find Zadira. "Where is it?" she asked Baku. The great panther's eyes darkened. "Lost to time, but there are whispers of a ruined city deep beyond the eastern mountains." Zuwena set her jaw. Then that was where she would go. She would uncover the secrets of her past. She would face her destiny. And she would end the curse, once and for all. Zuwena and Baku moved swiftly through the dense jungle, their path lit only by slivers of moonlight. The journey to Zadira, the forgotten kingdom, was long and treacherous. They had no choice but to move quickly. The priest of Nyoka was still haunting her. Baku led the way, his sleek form blending seamlessly into the darkness. Zuwena followed, her legs aching, but her mind determined. After hours of walking, she finally spoke. If Zadira was a kingdom, why has no one ever mentioned it in Mbali? Baku slowed his pace. Because its story was erased. The priest made sure no one remembered it. They wanted the world to forget the bloodline of the Serpent Goddess. Zuwena shivered. But why me? Why now? Thanks for watching to this point. Drop a like and subscribe for part 2.